Welcome. In this episode, I have the privilege of interviewing Matthew Burch a second time, where we finish his origin story and bring the narrative up to current day. In our first discussion, we talked about where it all began for Matthew and how that led to him working in the Air Force and what the transition out of the Air Force looked like for him. In this discussion, we continue exploring the theme of transitioning out of the military, but we do a deeper dive into the importance of finding purpose after the military. We talk about the importance of believing in yourself, relying on your skills that were developed in the military. It's a conversation that is relatable to those who've served in the military and those who have not. As a leader in the Air Force and in the business world, he has a lot of perspective that's grounded in experience. He is a wealth of insight, and I highly recommend you watch the discussion. So, without further ado, I give you Matthew Burch for part 2. And we're live. Here we are again. Matthew.
Part 2.
Part 2. Thanks for jumping on the line with me today.
I'm happy to be here.
The last conversation, we covered a large part of your origin story. And if you're just watching this video, I would highly recommend going back to restart the conversation because we're going to pick up where we left off in the last one. To that end, right before we hit record, Matthew, we were doing a bit of a refresh on where we left off. And to summarize it in a few words, it was transitioning out of the military.
Yeah, absolutely. Where would you like me to start with the transition? Because, I did TAP class like everyone else, which was that week of, in the Air Force, it's 5 days. I'm not sure about the other services. It's all congressionally mandated. There's always a minimum timeline. Some services might do more, some less. I don't know. My experience was Air Force specific. But it was that week of transition assistance. But realistically, I could go back out of my 23 years, 7 months, and 23 days that I served. I could go back to probably the first duty day at my first permanent duty location. And I could tell you I was already ready to transition. I'll give full disclosure. I never ever bought in to a lot of what the military was doing. And I'm not saying I didn't do the mission or I didn't do my job. I absolutely did, because the job was everything, right? Your job is your mission, and your mission is to be ready and to go handle Uncle Sam's business. Always did that. I never turned down a deployment. I never had an excuse to get out of work. I always did my 12 to 16 hours. I never hamstrung someone else to get ahead. I'm not that person. I never would be. Even in the civilian world where it's a whole lot more cutthroat. If you think you've got to be the loudest voice and you've got to have all the attention, you go ahead and have that attention. My accolades will come through my work. If it doesn't show in my work, then I didn't have accolades coming to me. And that's how I've always felt. But as far as the buying in part, I wasn't in the Air Force because I wanted to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. I wasn't in there to make E9. Everyone seems to think that that's everyone's mission. My mother actually asked me, she's like, well, why don't you want to be the top enlisted person? I'm like, well, Mom, do you know who the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force is? She's like, no, I have no idea. And I said, neither does anybody else. It's not that big of a deal to me to go after a name recognition. I've got to have this thing. Have I won awards? Did I earn medals? Did I earn things? Yes, I did. But I did it the right way so I could still look myself in the mirror, because when you were in the Marines, you guys didn't test for rank. You went to boards. So those boards were everything. And if you didn't have your performance reports and your PFT and, letters and earning medals and doing your job right and having good scores on the range, you didn't get anywhere. You can't be an average Marine and be, the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps or whatever you guys call your top enlisted person. So it wasn't, my time in the Air Force wasn't that for me. When I was 15 years old, I had a neighbor who was in the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA, World War II version of the CIA. He got pulled into that through, he kept getting in fist fights. He was in the Army, infantry guy, and every weekend he would go out on the town, and him and his friends would get in fist fights, and he was always getting thrown in the brig. And the OSS came to him and said, listen, you've got something we want, but you can't keep yourself out of trouble. So we need to kind of harness your energy because we have a place for you. The Army doesn't. The Army's going to throw you in jail forever if you don't stop this. Because he was drinking and fighting with his buddies. And so the OSS pulled him over, sent him through jump training and all kinds of other stuff. And they turned him into what turned out to be, as we know, a CIA operative in the context of World War II. Well, he told me, and he's an old man at this time. I mean, he got out of the Army after World War II and went on to have a life. And, he has a family and a son. Well, he owned, I don't know, 100 acres across the street from me. He lived on it, and he was a Teamsters trucker, and he had this very varied life. And he told me, my time in the military, they gave me all the training I could stand. If they had training available, I just raised my hand and I took it. And I said, well, what did that do for you? You were a truck driver. What did jump training do for you? He's like, I was never afraid to do anything because I already jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. What's dumber than that? What's more of a risk, jumping out of a perfectly good airplane or getting in a truck and driving through heavy traffic and it's 80,000 pounds? And he kind of put everything in perspective in that regard. So when I joined the Air Force, my whole idea was, and his name was Charlie. Charlie told me to go get all the free training I could get. So it turned into the Air Force is going to use me. They're going to take the best years of my life. Well, I'm going to use the Air Force back.
Mm-hmm.
You want something from me, which is time, and I want something from you, which is you're building my resume. So I took all the free training the Air Force had. And in maintenance, in aircraft maintenance in the Air Force, you've got to go through all these classes. And so anytime something popped up that said, hey, we want to send people through all this training at X, Y, or Z, my hand went up. And so I ended up getting one of the most important things I ever got in the Air Force for free training was called hazardous communications. And what it was basically how to use, transport, and store hazardous materials. We used sealants and grease and oil. It's all hazardous. There's an MSDS with it. There's, it's got to be in a specific little yellow locker as if it's flammable and all that. Well, that turned out to be really useful to me in a lot of ways. And it paid dividends. And now I've used it a couple of times since I've gotten out of the military, 20 years after I got that course, because it was a hazmat course. Hey, do you have a hazmat course? Of course I do. Here it is. Here's a certificate. Away we go. Even though it's 20 years old, it still was applicable. So in that regard, my transition from the Air Force started the first week I was in the Air Force, because I went to basic training. I went to tech training to be an aircraft mechanic. And then once I got there, I got all the training I could on aircraft, and then anything external to that, hazmat, safety. The Air Force was coming out of the quality Air Force days. And if you've ever heard anybody talk about the 90s and Merrill McPeak as our chief of staff of the Air Force, he came out with these quality programs where it was basically, we're going to start programs so we have something for people to do. It was quality Air Force, and it was a terrible idea. It was busy work is all it was. Well, I went through quality Air Force training, and I went through, this and that. So in all three of my career fields, I always tried to go and get more free training. So my transition started when Charlie Moore in Everett, Michigan, when I was 15 years old, before I even joined the Air Force, told me, take anything they're going to give you for free, because they'll take anything up to and including your life back from you. That's the deal we sign, right? Was that a reality in the mid 90s when I joined? Not really. Bosnia was happening. There was some of this stuff over here in Africa. There's always something in Africa. The Middle East we were doing air expeditionary force deployments on a rotation to the Middle East. Not a whole lot of people dying. 9/11 happens, and then you and I both served after 9/11, so we know what happened there. You specifically serving in the capacity you served in the Marine Corps, you saw plenty of that. So was there a chance that you could have cashed the here's up to and including my life check? Yes, of course. Do we know? I personally know people who died. I'm not sure if you did or not. So yeah, that became a reality. So if you're going to take that from me, I'm going to take everything I can from you. Education. I use my tuition assistance to further my education. The Air Force has associate's degrees they give with every career field. Well, I have 3 of them. I left with a teaching degree and 2 others. So I took all of that free training because I knew the train was going to stop. I was going to have to get off the train, and the train was going to keep going on without me, without mercy. Because once your time in the military is done, they keep trucking. So your transition has to start from a very early age in the military, because you have to realize, number one, the ride ends and you got to get off, and no one's going to be looking back because they can't. The mission keeps going and they need to keep going forward. The rearview mirror is smaller than the windshield for a reason. So let's keep moving forward. So that was kind of my transition journey. Started day one. 24-ish years later, I'm coming up on getting out. I go through the TAP class like everyone else. There were some people that were younger than, they had done an enlistment or two. There were some people retiring. There were people, I think there was everybody from one enlistment to, I think there was a 30-year colonel in there. So you have this giant gambit of experience, giant gambit of career, where they're at in their careers getting out. And I had already had job offers. So I wasn't worried about transitioning, because either I was going to be in business for myself or I was going to come up with a job. Kind of both happened. Um, I had I already had a construction company that I had started to set up. I already had all the tools because I had been remodeling my own houses for multiple years. So I had a lot of the tools that I needed. So if I had to go that route, I could. If I wanted to go get a job as a contractor or use my clearance, I could. So I had avenues, and it didn't seem as if anyone's perspective was aligned with, let's stop and think about what gifts you have. Where are you particularly at? Do you have a degree? Do you have school? Did you have a job that came with a giant clearance? Do you have a skill in demand? Do you have what can you do for someone else if you want to go get a job? I think a couple of people had touched on it in a couple of podcasts I listened to, but I think overall, one of the things that we as veterans don't do very well is market ourselves. And one of our greatest marketing skills is our ruthless adaptability. It doesn't matter where you drop one of us, we are gonna make it happen. And I think that's part of our purpose in the military. That's the great one of the greatest things the military does is they bring you in, they take you off the street as a civilian, and you show up and they're asking you, you're screaming at you, pick your bag up and set it down and do a reporting statement and sir, aye, sir, and all these other things. And in 6 weeks, when someone calls a room to attention, the room falls silent, everyone stands rail straight. And well, you know, somehow you went from not having any kind of idea what you were getting yourself into to following orders without question. And I think that's an amazing thing that we do when we bring people off the street, but it also makes us ruthlessly adaptable through training, because they teach us how to deal with hardship. Because in hard times, what do? We rely on the guy next to us. We're holding each. I don't have to like you at all, Logan. I don't know you. I don't know who you are. You may have said something coarse to me in the chow hall, and I see you 10 minutes later and you're laying there and you got hit with a rocket. I don't care what you said to me. I'm going to come over there. I'm going to pull out bandages out of your med kit. And I'm going to start patching you up so you can get home. That's one thing about the veterans. You hear people say, well, you know, you can listen to 2 service members from different places and different services give each other a hard time, but then some slack jawed civilian comes up and starts it, and now both of us are going to fight that guy. You don't get to insult us. I was insulting him because I earned the right to do so, and he did the same for me. Who are you? Get out of here. You know what I mean? That's not how giving a service member a bunch of crap works. But what makes us, we all get a little bit of medical training on the most rudimentary level. We all get like a little bit of HR training. We all get a little bit of carry a stretcher. You all get a little bit of how a Humvee works. Are you going to be really proficient when you jump in that Humvee? No. Are you going to be really good at applying bandages? No. You're probably going to hurt somebody in the long run. I worked in a hospital. I was in Afghanistan. That was when they were putting the quick clot on people. Well, they figured out that quick clot travels through the bloodstream and it does a whole lot of damage in the area it's applied. So they went back to more of a shell. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but that they changed up the bandages. We evolved on the battlefield through trauma treatment. Well, I still don't know that I'm going to be the best at applying that bandage, but I'm going to be ruthlessly adaptable. When I see a service member on the ground bleeding, I'm going to go over there and figure it out, rip it open, slap it on the wound, apply a whole bunch of gauze or an Israeli bandage. I'm going to wrap him up the best I can. I'm going to apply a tourniquet. I'm going to come out and do my job for 16 hours because I'm ruthlessly adaptable in the amount of hours I can work. I'm going to eat cold food that's supposed to be hot. I'm going to eat hot food that's supposed to be cold. I'm going to drink a warm can of Coca-Cola. I'm going to drink the most disgusting cold black coffee because that's what I have available to me on my 16-hour shift to get the airplane in the air because it's got to drop a bomb and protect some ground pounder that I'm never going to see. Those are the ruthless adaptability. You will die trying adaptability of the military, and we bring that with us. That never leaves us. You train that into me, I can't get rid of it. I cannot stop that part of me now. That became a part of my personality. Like I would say 99% of service members, you just do the job until it's done. My ex-father-in-law left the Army as a helicopter mechanic, and they had to yell at him as he got into civil service because he would stay so long. He would burn up all his weekly hours in like 3 days because he would just stay until the job's done because that's all he's ever done. Well, no. We do 8 hours. We go home. We ask for permission for overtime. Well, in active duty, there's no overtime. I'm paid 24 hours a day. I'm here. You got me. So that part of it, that doesn't leave. So bringing that into a lot of our jobs can be contract downrange as deployed in deployed locations, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, whatever your schedule is. And a lot of times you're doing the same job you were doing on active duty as a contractor. So I think that's one of the biggest things that you bring with you that you don't realize you have. People don't, once you start putting a label on it and you start bringing their perspective to ruthless adaptability, loyalty, commitment, I'm going to be loyal to this job. I'm going to be committed to the team that I'm on. You're going to hand me a set of tasks, and those tasks are going to get this software out the door. It's going to get this particular part out the door. Whatever you're doing for a job, it's going to be there, and you're going to have that. And veterans bring that no matter what their job was. You were Marine infantry, right? So
Yeah.
not the most technical job unless the gun goes down, then you got to kind of fix the gun, but I'm still going to hire you and train you to do something because I know that you will learn very quickly. Look how fast we taught you from a civilian from the day you arrived at basic training to the day you graduated and went to your first unit as permanent party. Look how fast you learned how to do your job. What was that? 20 weeks, 25 weeks at the most?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So within 0 to 6 months, you're now at least a capable rifleman in the beloved Corps versus what were you 6 months ago? Some kid named Logan who was too skinny and didn't have to shave because he didn't have any facial hair. And now we made you shave every day, and now your beard's growing out, and now you're a Marine. You know what I mean? It's you have to learn very quickly. And the military training, I went to combat training, and they said military training is based on adrenaline input in the sense that when you are under extreme amounts of duress, you are always going to fall back to your lowest level of training, the reflex that you have. Get off the X, return fire, react fast and violent. That's what they wanted us to do in combat training because that's that's what we were there for. We were there to take people who didn't go into a combat MOS or a combat AFSC and give them a couple weeks worth of training so they could at least survive the initial impact, get off the X and get to safety. And then whatever their response was, make sure it's fast and violent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where you're going to fall back to when your heart's slamming through your chest and it's adrenaline and your pupils are dilated to the point where your irises don't even have color anymore and everything's exploding around you. So we're training people to be thorough, but at the same time, we know that when the chips are down and bullets are flying at you, you're gonna fall back to your lowest level of training, and you're gonna do your job still. You're going to apply medical aid. You're going to drag your friends to safety. You're going to drive through the ambush. You're going to push through the roadblocks. You're going to do all these things. Not because you want to. Your initial response is, oh, that's a roadblock. Let's take another route. Well, we don't know if there's another route. Just keep pushing through. That's not a normal human response. And there's a lot of jobs in the military that the normal average person, not having experienced it and then being presented with that scenario, would be like, wow, that sounds awful. How'd you get through it? Oh, I went through this thing called basic training, and then they yelled at me a lot, and all of a sudden I can do these magical things. So the military training we got is valuable, and it taught us all these lessons. The military gave us this purpose. Then you get to transition, they take your purpose, right? Everything you identified, I am a staff sergeant, I'm a gunnery sergeant, I am a master sergeant, I am a X, I am a mechanic, I'm an infantryman, I am a sensor operator, I am insert job name here. Now that doesn't exist because you're leaving the Air Force, or you're retiring from the Air Force, or whatever it is. We've taken your purpose, and I think that's where a lot of veterans stumble after they leave the service, where they have that first year where they're starting to figure out their life because they've been asking for permission or waiting for orders or been told to do or whatever for so many years that it conditioned them to now still think that they need some sort of permission to keep going, and they don't. Like and the Captain Phillips would be, look at me, I'm the captain now. Well, you're the captain now. You got all the decisions from here on out. That's it. It's on you. So when I talked in the last session about I can solve a lot of veterans' problems by handing them a helmet and body armor, a full combat loadout, and 2 weapons, and say, stand in front of this door, and there are people allowed to be here and there are people are not. And if the people are not allowed to be here show up, you better die trying to keep them out. It would be an amazing change in their personality, their demeanor. They'd stand up straight. They'd look at you. Yes, sir. Got it. Understood. And then there'd be no question. They would just guard that door with their life, or they would guard a building with their life. And it's because we gave them that purpose back. We told them, hey, this is your thing, own it, and die trying. And we were also taught through our military training, whether it was intentionally said to us or it was implied, that there is honor in dying for a cause as noble as this: the Constitution, the flag, the idea of America, American exceptionalism, projecting democracy across the world to oppress people. There's nobility in dying for that cause. So we didn't have a problem dying for that cause. We never made. You might think that you were worried about dying, but then you got there and you weren't worried about dying. You weren't worried about how your parents felt about it. But I guarantee your mom was just a nervous wreck for 6 to 8 to 10 months or however long you were gone. I've gotten home and my mother looked at me. She's like, I haven't slept in 6 months. Why? It wasn't that bad. It doesn't matter. My baby is in XYZ and it's dangerous there. We don't realize that because it's all proportional to us. The danger is all proportional. Well, if I go out the gate, it's going to be dangerous. Well, we're not going out the gate. We're not going out the gate today, so it doesn't matter. Therefore, it's not dangerous. Even though I'm still in Afghanistan, I'm getting rockets every night, and I got to get out of my rack and go to the bomb shelter with my body armor, my helmet, my weapon, because usually what's following those rockets is an incursion into the fence, into the perimeter. but I don't think it's dangerous because I'm inside the fence. And to me, it's not dangerous because I'm inside the fence and I can get in the bunker. It's fine. I'll just go sleep in the bunker. And I know a few times that I had to go to the bunker that I actually kind of nodded off sitting there with my body armor like this, like, are we done yet? Are we done yet? Can we be done with the rockets? And it's odd what you get used to, but that's the ruthless adaptability. That's where you start to put things into some sort of scale, the sliding scale of danger across a deployment is, well, I'm inside the gate, everything's fine. I'm outside the gate, maybe it's not fine. I'm way far away from the base on a patrol. And Army Rangers are always out there picking a fight, right? They're always running around trying to stir up stuff. You guys were kicking in doors and pulling people out and looking for XYZ, throwing flexi cuffs on people. Well, those aren't normal activities, but I guarantee you probably high-fived your buddies when you're all done. You're like, hey, look at what we lived through. We got the guy. There's 10 guys here. Mission accomplished. Meanwhile, you went through a fatal funnel and you could have died 10 times. But you don't think about that. That's not the part of it you're thinking about. So it's all relative. And if you have decided that you are going to redefine your own purpose through your transition, then you're already ahead of the game, because people don't think about their purpose and they don't think about I'm adaptable. If I can adapt to a really dangerous situation, I can go put on business casual and a badge around my neck and walk into a computer research facility on Redstone Arsenal. I only say that because I did that. That was my first job coming out of the Air Force. I got a job as a contractor at the Joint Simulation and Integration Laboratory on Redstone Arsenal, and I developed targeting software for any aircraft that had a targeting pod, which is basically cameras and lasers, like the gunships and other UAVs or MC-12s, any kind of ISR platform. So was it always easy? No, I still wanted to yell at people. I still wanted to be in charge, and I wasn't. And you've got to adapt to your surroundings. You've got to adapt to your new reality. Your paycheck's not as big as it was from the Air Force anymore, because they took all your entitlements and they give you half of your base pay at whatever rate you are when you retire. But then, well, I'm making this other money as a contractor, so I still get my mailbox money every month from the Air Force. They're going to send me that no matter what for the rest of my life. But now I have to look at, okay, well, what am I worth? What's my purpose here? Well, I'm worth XYZ. My clearance has been renewed, so my clearance is still good. I'm going to save the company money there. I don't need any of these benefits because I've got TRICARE and I pay for that, and it's really inexpensive. So I don't have to take their health care. Do I really want to deal with their 401k, or do I want to do my own? Or do I not even want to bother with a 401k? So start realigning your perspective with everything that you have. You have bargaining chips with the fact that you can get TRICARE for less money, or if you're single and you're just using the VA, you're using the VA for all your healthcare needs. Well, that's pretty inexpensive to zero. So you don't have to take expensive $1,200 a paycheck insurance. You don't have to take their 401k if you've already got something set up that you want to deal with on your own. So you've got bargaining chips as a veteran that the average civilian may not necessarily have. Biggest one is clearance. Hey, my clearance got renewed XYZ. It's brand new. I don't have to put you through that process. I've got XYZ amount of years left on my clearance because it is brand new. Let's talk about where that falls into my compensation package. So, you got to start standing up for yourself in that regard. There's a lot of things that people are missing because they're so wrapped around the axle of this ride ends. They're not concentrating on, yes, it ends, but what's the rest of that? So I'll let you ask me some questions or guide this a little bit further as far as where you want to go with this next. That was a very long, drawn out 28 minutes on me transitioning out of the Air Force and my philosophy on it. So
Thank you for sharing, Matthew. I love the ruthless adaptability
that
concept.
that is our number one attributes as veterans. There is no situation that you can put a veteran in that is gonna they're not gonna adapt to. I have not seen it yet, and I've talked to a lot of people. I've worked in the Department of Justice and the DoD twice, and I've not found one veteran that was not adaptable in any other way outside of being. They get in there, they figure out what's going on, and they just run with it.
The connection to purpose is interesting, and I wonder if you could share your perspective on connecting to a new purpose and how to how in your experience, in your view, you find that, you create that, what does that look like? I think the analogy you used about stand in front of the door makes total sense. um, I haven't shared this often, but one of my jobs when I got out for a little while was doing door security at some spots down in Miami to help make ends meet. And it was fun. It's not brainless, but it's easy when
Yeah.
you've done a lot of that, standing in front of a door and seeing who gets in and who gets out is like an easy purpose to connect to. Talk about the the purposes on a longer time horizon, like a career, a family, a spiritual path, a business venture, something like that. How do you adapt your viewpoint and find that new noble cause that you're willing to lay it all out for a long time?
That came to me in stages. So one of the things coming out of the Air Force I wanted to do was I want it's no longer about purpose. If you want to think of it this way, I sold myself cheap to the government for a long time. And in doing so, I gave at the office all I was ever going to give, right? I gave to the noble cause. I I I supported and I defended, and as I'm getting out, now it's my time to turn the table towards what benefits me. And if it doesn't benefit me, if it's not good for me and my family, then what's the purpose of doing it, right? And that was part of my purpose. Like, I don't want to use foul language, but there's no other way to say it. There is an element that comes out where it turns into fuck you, pay me. I don't have to be here for any other reason other than to be paid a very specific amount for what I think I'm worth. I always negotiate my salary. I never just take the first offer. I go back to them and they say, well, I can't make that decision. You have to talk to the director. Get them on the line. Because if you really want me to do this job, we're going to have a conversation in long form about why you offered me this and why I'm asking for this. And I always ask for an astronomical amount and let them talk me down, because I know what I bring to the table in determination, education, experience, my security clearance. I currently hold a TS SCI, and I have maintained that for a very long time, which in and of itself is not necessarily a hard feat to do, but it can be a challenge for some people depending on their situation. But when it comes down to that principle of getting paid, your purpose needs to be whatever your priorities are going to be. For me, I have a 9-year-old son. He's got special needs. I need to make sure he's taken care of. I need to make sure his medical is taken care of. I don't know that he'll ever live on his own. I don't know that he'll ever be able to go to college or even trade school. He's got some learning difficulties. He's got some developmental delays. He's got some physical attributes that he's got to overcome: coordination, small muscle control, speech. You know, he's not autistic. He's got he's got a he's got a genetic disorder. He's got a repeating gene, and that causes some of these issues. He's one of 2 children that's ever been identified by the DoD as having this particular affliction, and there's no rhyme or reason behind it, because the other child has my son has 48 repetitions. The other child has less than half repetition of those repetitions of the same gene, and that other child is a vegetable in a wheelchair and will never be any more than they are when they were born. That's the affliction that child was given at birth. My son can walk, talk, run, ride a bike. He can do a whole lot of things. He doesn't always do them well, He's in the 4th grade and he just learned to read. But I am really thankful that my son is where he's at, because I know I didn't see the alternative, but the doctor laid out the alternative of, your son was born this way. We don't know why. That child was born that way. We don't know why. And they have the exact same thing. So, and that kid had less of it than my son did. So I'm just grateful that I have the boy that I have. I'm grateful for him to be where he's at, and he's learning to read, and he's becoming more and more as he grows up. He's almost 10, and he's leaps and bounds where he was. He goes through tutoring. He's in a private school. He gets physical therapy, orthodontist work, because of his face was not structured correctly. So we're getting that done through, expanders and braces and all these things. So that's part of my purpose. I need to make sure that my son has a chance to have a normal life. Does he join the Army and become an Army Ranger and jump out of airplanes and go crazy? I don't know. Does he play a professional sport? I don't know. Is he going to work with his dad forever? Because I will start a business and make sure that it's something he can do, and I will absolutely make sure that it works for him 100%. I know I can do that for him. So my purpose is to take care of him. My daughter, she's 20. She's in school. She's got a rocket on her back if she wants to ignite it, or she can do whatever else she wants. She's kind of living out her dream right now of being a 20-year-old and working at Domino's, and she's an assistant manager, and that's what she's doing right now. She's also in school. So I don't know what she wants to do. She doesn't know what she wants to do, but I'm trying to support her the best I can. But with her, she doesn't demand as much attention as my son does. So my purpose coming out was, I need to make enough money to be able to take care of my son no matter what. I need to earn enough money to put him in a private school and pay for tutoring and pay for an orthodontist, which is not cheap. And you're going to find that out with your daughter if she needs an orthodontist. It's what a racket. I should have been an orthodontist. But those are the things that kind of started to get placed in the purpose column as I was leaving the Air Force and turning that over to the next generation. Take care of my kids, take care of my family, make sure that if something happens with my mother, she's taken care of. So that's kind of where it started to steer. But as far as me personally, I have to take care of me, because if I don't take care of me, I can't take care of anyone else. So with my purpose, I'm out here working right now. I work at the FBI headquarters building as a contractor. I plan construction projects for the FBI within the headquarters in the national capital region. So my purpose is to go do that right now for a living. That's how I'm keeping the lights on. I also started my own business, and I went and got my cage code so I can do federal contracting. And I remember in our initial conversation before we recorded the podcast for the first episode, I talked to you about trying to help veterans find a purpose. And that's one of the ways I would like to, part of my purpose is to help other veterans find their purpose. So working to keep the lights on, working to develop myself I just actually was down in Virginia Beach a couple weekends ago, getting a professional certification in construction quality management. So that can bolster my career, whether it's for me working as a contractor or me as the owner of Loggerhead Dynamics. And so I got, the purposes are take care of my family, take care of me, help other veterans. And I think one of the greatest things that any veteran can do is get back out of once you're done in the military, start your own company, start your own purpose, and then get into government contracting, because it's a way for you to be involved in the form of life that you recognize, because we've all been down range and seen these contractors there. You saw people walking around in t-shirts and jeans, and you're wearing body armor or helmet. You're like, why is t-shirt and jeans and running shoes okay over here, but I got to wear all this shit? Well, that's just their life. That's not your life. You got the Marine Corps life or the Air Force life or the Army life. They got been there and already done that life, and now they're getting paid to be there to do something in a different capacity. So if you want to think of it it gets you back into the ecosystem in which you're familiar in a work way. starting a business and getting a cage code and getting into federal contracting. But it also allows you to go back and get that back pay that you never got paid for, all that overtime you gave, those 12 and 16-hour days downrange for 8 and 9, 10 months, sometimes 15 months at a time, where you walk away, you're like, man, if I would have got paid that time and a half, I really would have came home with a nice nest egg. Well, now you can go to federal contracting, and as long as you follow the rules, you can go get all that money back. You can get all that back pay out of the government. So, I mean, that's just one aspect of it, but it's a good way to make money. It's a good way to I guess support the government if that's what you still want to do. It's a good way to get paid. But when I looked at starting my own business, because I'd done 2 contracts, I'd done 2 DoD contracts, one for the Army and one for directly for the Department of Defense, and I looked at my boss one day and I said, "What are you getting paid for me to be here?" And he says, "I can't give you the number that we're making on each position on the contract, but you as a fully burdened labor rate on this contract are usually 1.5 to 2 times what I'm paying you. So for me to make, at that time I was making 105,000. So you're making at least 50 to another 105,000 on top of that." And the thing was, you didn't have to do anything for that money with me because I didn't take your 401k. I didn't take your benefits or your pet insurance or any of the other ridiculous things they try to offer you through the company. And so where another employee might be eating into that $100,000 that you're making extra on top of what you're paying me, they were just taking it all. They were getting the whole 105,000 if they're making a 2 times fully burdened labor rate. So I thought to myself, well, why can't I do that? Why can't I start a company, get a cage code, get registered, and start doing these contracts? Why can't I make that money? Why can't I hire people? Why can't I go get what I deserve in the world through being a company owner and a government contractor, fully registered federal contractor, whether I work for the State Department or the DOD or the DOJ or whoever, it doesn't matter. A cage code's a cage code, and I can go after anything I want. So that's what made me get into government contracting and drive towards doing that. Let me just tell you, full disclosure, I'm not sitting in here raking in thousands of dollars sitting just idly. I have to work every day. I work 40 hours a week for another federal contractor while I'm trying to stand my business up. It's not a fast process. You're not going to walk out and get multi-million dollar contracts because, well, you've got this set aside, or you can go do this, or you can go do that. It doesn't happen that quickly. And I want to make sure that people have a full understanding that I'm not just sitting here. Like I know I spun the laptop around after we talked the last time and showed you the world headquarters of Loggerhead Dynamics. It's a desk in my tiny apartment in Bethesda right now. So it's not millions of dollars. Just, hey, I got a cage code. Where's my money? It doesn't work like that. But I'm working towards employing other veterans and giving them a purpose, and then in turn teaching them how to do it themselves and getting them along the way so they can go out and do that for themselves, redefine their purpose. I found that entrepreneurship gives you the same, I don't want to say dopamine rush, as having the purpose of the military. Then you walk away from that and then you redefine your purpose. And it's not exactly the same, but it's the closest thing that I've found. Mm-hmm. So knowing that I can go after a contract, I know how to deal with the contract, understanding all the ins and outs of it. That's kind of where I want to end up guiding my own personal journey. And if I can help veterans do that, that'd be great as well. So
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Matthew, you're a wealth of insight.
Well, I really want to help anybody who is struggling with their transition, because, and I also don't think transitioning out of the military ever ends. I don't agree that, oh well, I got out and I landed a job and I'm transitioned out. I don't think it works that way, because there's certain things that never go away from us, and I think that it's always important. You're always a work in progress. So always trying to strive to improve your situation is, I think it's it's paramount to your overall journey in life, especially after the military.
I really align with what you said about the ruthless adaptability, aligning your purpose with your priorities when you get out,
Hmm.
and leveraging the bargaining chips that
Yeah.
you have, recognizing your own unique abilities, and not being afraid to stand up for yourself
Hmm.
in negotiations. There's probably some more that I missed, but as we land the plane here, and if you were to consider a veteran in the process of getting out, early in the process of getting out, uh, how would you summarize everything we've discussed in the last two podcasts into a philosophical shot of espresso for them to take away with and run on their journey?
I would say always be grounding your perspective in your actual reality. Perspective is real to those perceiving it. So if I perceive that you slighted me, you slighted me. Whether you did or you didn't, whether it was a mistake, you said something off color and it didn't land right, whatever. Align your perspective for your journey in reality and understand your gifts, your strengths, understand your weaknesses, understand that if you were a big fish in the pond coming out of the military, you're not going to be a big fish. You're going to be one of multiple hundreds of thousands of us that leave the service every year. And sometimes it matters if you are a full bird colonel, and sometimes it doesn't. I've worked with, I've been in charge of other people who outranked me when they were in the military. I work with a former lieutenant commander in the Navy right now who he and I do the same exact job. So it wasn't his experience as a lieutenant commander in the Navy that mattered. It was the fact that he was doing construction management in other areas. He was doing project management work in other areas. That's what got him the job. And we're both project planners for these construction projects. So rank wise, you need to let that go. Realize that nobody cares that you are a lieutenant colonel or an E3 or anything else. They don't care about that. They care about what you bring to the table: loyalty, adaptability, trainability, how fast you learn. Are you going to be able to set your ego aside? Realign everything in reality. Look at everything as a brass tacks situation. What are you paying me? Can we negotiate? Why did you offer me this when I could have asked for that? You know what I mean? Really get down and ask the questions, because where we couldn't always ask questions because we were following orders before, now we have the ability to ask all the questions we want and to negotiate our position leaving the military. So just realize you're in charge. Keep it based in reality. Be realistic. I mean, yeah, I want to get paid $500,000 a year to do whatever it is I'm doing, but is that job worth $500,000? Am I worth $500,000 in this particular capacity? So be realistic. I mean, yeah, you can shoot for the moon and be talked down, but also realize that if you were a colonel in the Air Force and you were a command pilot and they want you to be an instructor pilot, the colonel part doesn't matter. The war college part doesn't matter. The part that matters in that is, can you still be an instructor pilot? I would say that anybody that made colonel as a pilot in the Air Force, at least at some point, was an instructor pilot. Most likely, a lot of them go through the weapons school, so they're experts in their platform. So yeah, I want that guy as an instructor pilot. I don't want everything else that goes with it. The rest of that stuff doesn't matter. Talk to me about being an instructor pilot. You're being paid to be an instructor pilot. You're going to come in, instruct, and leave. No one's asking you to do anything else. So if the work is the work and then you get to go home, negotiate accordingly. If it's the work plus an admin program, plus this, plus that, plus a mentoring thing, negotiate accordingly. So just keep everything grounded in reality, keep your perspective aligned to reality, and realize you are the most important thing to yourself. You are in charge of yourself. You have to conduct yourself accordingly, but also realize that you're going to go back to being a cog in a wheel. You're a cog in the machine, if you will, and that your cog might not be important today, but you might get promoted to be a bigger cog. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
And then when you get the promotion, ask for more cash.
Matthew, these conversations have been illuminating, insightful. You're a true servant leader. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to share these insights, the wisdom you've gained over a lifetime of diverse experience. I know it's going to be accessible and inspiring to others, regardless if they were in the military or not. And I think it set the stage for follow-on discussions where we can look to the future and cast a vision now that we've covered your history and some of the things that you're focused on now. Thank
Yeah,
you again.
absolutely. And if you want me back for part 3 or for a future episode or whatever it is, I'd love to be back. I'd like to definitely like to share anything I can. If there's some sort of response, if people have questions, whatever it is, I'm happy to address it.
Awesome. Is there anything else you think we should align on before we break from episode 2?
No, I don't think so.
It's been a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.